Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Good day and welcome to another edition of our Gimmal Education series. My name is Marcia Shields and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions are to enhance your expertise with your Gimmal software. This session is being recorded and will be shared after the event and also on our YouTube channel at Gimmal Solutions. Jeff Tuish is with me, and he is going to be our subject matter expert for today's session about Gimmal Discover. Jeff's going to be focusing on interpreting, locating, and reviewing log files. Before we get to that, though, Jeff, if you could go to the next slide. Great, thank you. Just a reminder, this year we have started our Gimmal All-Star program, and this is really to reward you for joining us on these sessions and taking the time to learn more about our Gimmal software. For each session that you register, attend, and/or any LinkedIn poll or post-session survey you take, you'll be accumulating points. And once you reach 3,000 points, you will get your Gimmal All-Star pin. So I will be tracking these, and recognitions will be announced at the end of each quarter. Before we start, I am going to ask the team here if we could do a little poll question. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to answer this. The question today is, how many times have you downloaded Gimmal Discover logs to review them? I'm betting on my guess here, but we'll see what everybody says after I let this run and as people continue to answer that. So I will let that go for now. Today's session is going to be the same format of about 15 to 20 minutes for product demonstration, followed by 10 minutes to answer any of your questions. All your questions, if you have them, please post them in the Q&A area of your Zoom bar, and we'll make sure to address them after. Jeff, I think that's it on my end. I'm going to hand things off to you.
Great. Thanks, Marcia.
You bet.
Close out this. Okay, interpreting log files. So the first thing we're going to talk about is give you some idea of how the whole logging works. So there's actually no slide for this. I just want to paint you a picture. As you all know, there's Discover's installed on a VM. So the connector and agents, which actually both produce logs, are also added on the VM. So there's a specific folder, and I'll be showing you that during the slides, specific folder where the logs are kept real time. So as the connector and agents are running and performing work, then those logs will be updated on the VM. On a frequency, they'll be pushed up to the Azure database in the cloud so we can view them in a browser. So just wanted to lay that foundation of how logs are being created and where they're being managed. So first thing, there's two different types of logs, which seems confusing, I'm sure. So if you ever opened up, gone to, and one of the places you can do inside of Discover is there's a green button that says logs on the UI, and you can click on that if you're looking for things like, well, that's not what I'm looking for. Where did those go? So there's two types of logs. There's the service logs, which are represented by clicking on that green icon, which I'll be showing you in a bit. There's also the policy logs, which includes not only data governance and classification policies, but also e-discovery searches. So when you run any one of those three, additional logs are being created, and there's going to be a log per data target that's being processed by those three policies or searches. So I wanted to lay that foundation. So we have the service log, which just says, hey, the connector's running, the agent's running. I perform a data target search. That would be on the agent log. I perform a person search, a data owner search. That'd be in the connector log. But you start running things inside of one of those three modules, data governance, classification, or e-discovery. Those are different logs. So let's go find out what's going on with those. So as I try to advance, and for some reason cannot, let me try it this way. There we go. All right. First thing I talk about is log retention. So how long are logs kept? We are asked that question a lot, and people say, I want to change it. Well, you actually have the power. So inside, you'll notice here, I did a little screenshot. Up in the upper right-hand corner are the purple gears. Here's a little bigger shot of it. And if you go to the administrative tab, you're going to see a log retention time. You get to control how long those logs are kept. I would encourage you probably to not make those be 1 day, because if you run something over the weekend, you come in on Monday and you say, hey, something failed, we'd have no way of helping you. So keep it at a nice number to prune the logs, but don't be too over aggressive with making the log time pretty small. So that's where you can set how long logs are kept. Now, how do we get to the logs, to the service logs? Remember, there's two different types. Once again, little screenshot here, upper right-hand corner is the green button. This is where we see those service logs. That's going to come up and list for you all the different components of Discover that are producing logs. I always sort mine in descending order, so I see the most recent one on top. But over to the left, you're going to notice you have the ability to say, by default, I think it defaults to today. You could do, actually, I might default to all. I can't remember, but you have the choices here. And you could go to today's logs only, yesterday's, last 7 days, last 30 days. So you have to click apply. Once you select that option, click apply, and then you can see the logs representing what you chose. Keep in mind, just like we can with any other view inside of Discover, you have the ability to filter. So if you only want to see the file agent logs and not the rest of them, just click on the vertical ellipsis, select the filter, and type in file agent as your type of log that you want to view. So that's where you see the service logs. All right, next, I want to talk about putting debug logging on. I always advise debug logging to be put on because when you go into the logs, if you're hunting for something specific, it'd be good if it was there. And the way that you're going to ensure it's there is by doing debug logging. So notice I clicked on the number in the connectors box. Then I selected the connector I wanted to see, went to the more button and connector settings, because that's where you can set debug being on or off. So the next slide, we're going to see that on the global setting, you can actually go right here and click on this, and that's going to set the debug mode on every one of these different tabs. So you can either do it individually if you so choose, but I would encourage you just to click on this, and then you can see that debug mode is enabled for everything. You also can turn on Windows event logging if you want to have that on, just in case there's something in there that's telling as far as helping trying to debug. So that's where you can apply the debug logging, and what it's going to give for you if you're managing email or files. Every message, every file is going to be in there as it gets processed. So it's going to highlight the information. You're going to know what's being processed. The debug mode actually always is prepended with debug on the line within the log file. So that's going to help you understand what you're getting out of that. One of the other things I was remiss in showing on here, but there's the ability in the workflows for data governance and classification to add your own logging in. That's an action. So if you're in the workflow editor and say we're processing files, you can right click on that, add an action of add to agent log, and you have carte blanche on what you want to put in there. So I use that a lot when I'm trying to determine if everything logic wise is working. I add to that agent log. So that's in there. All right, next, we want to talk about how I can get the logs sooner than what Discover wants to give them to me. So as I said, the logs are kept on the VM where the Discover connector and agents are installed, and they're going through and constantly updating those logs. On a frequency basis, they're going to be pushed up to the cloud. But if you're a type A personality like me, and you say, I yell to microwave, I don't want to wait 5 minutes for that, you can go out and request the service log. So this is the connector here, as you see. I put a check mark next to it, go to action, request service log, which basically means, hey, Discover, I don't want it on your time frame. I want it on mine. So you can go out and select that to have that service log for the connector come up so I can view them. Going back to that green log button at the top we saw on the upper right, that's where we're going to be able to view those logs. The same thing holds true for the agents. If I go into the agent list, so I go to, I select a connector, go to more and agent list. And then what I'll see is I can select the agent that I want using action and request service log. Once again, these are not for the policies or the e-discovery searches. These are just the service log. So you're not going to get information about the data targets being processed here. This is just overall about the service, the Windows service that's running. So that's how you would get those. Then if you want to say, hey, when is that going to happen? You can go to the more button back at the connectors and go to pending command list. And you'll see here it's saying, hey, I requested the logs. So if you want to be a little how do I say this kindly, not want to wait too long, you can go in and common refresh grid until this guy goes away. So what's going to happen is it's going to go through and say, hey, there's a pending request. I need to go fulfill this. So if you're don't want to wait quite so long, you want to make sure it's happened, just go into the pending command list. And once this disappears, that means that Discover has honored your request and the log should be getting pushed up. So that's how you get these service logs out of Discover. But now let's talk about the other kinds of logs. And these are the ones most often that you're going to be looking within. And these are the ones that you're running. So here I'm running a policy in data governance, and it's running on mailboxes. And I just started this manually by going to action start policy. And what you're going to remember, if you've ever been on a call with me and we're saying, hey, I want to watch and see what's happening, initially the status line is either going to have hashes in it if it's never been run, it being the policy, or it's going to have the last time that it ran with the information about how it finished. But as soon as you start it, then what you're going to be seeing here within seconds is processing 0 of 0. What that means is Discover is still trying to determine how many data targets need to be processed. That's what that 4 represents here, is the number of data targets. So in this case, I'm trying to process 4 mailboxes. So that's what you're going to get. And as that number increases on the left side, that means how many have completed. But at any time, you can go in and look and see what's happening. So if you click on the status here in this box, that is a link. Notice the blue. And then that's going to bring up another window. I can click on the status here in the workflow. That's another link. And notice it's saying 0-4. So I click on this first, then I go to the workflow column, click on that. And then what I'm going to get is this. So what this is showing me, if you notice here, we got Chandra Bing's mailbox and some of us Gimmels in here as well. And it's showing me that what's the status for each one of these data targets. And here it is coming out a little bit to give you some idea. But this is what you're seeing in the UI, is it's going to show you this. Now, as a mailbox is finished processing, that status is going to change to completed. So if you're going back, remember we had 0-4, say you're running a policy on 100 data targets, and you call up the support at Gimmal and say, how do I know how far this thing has got? Well, out of the 100 to the left of that slash is how far it's done. Then your next question will be, well, how do I know which ones are finished? Well, just follow the directions I showed you on the previous slide, and now you'll see which ones are still processing and which ones have completed, or maybe which ones have failed. So you can see that inside of here as well. So where are those logs on the VM? Right here. So what we do is we create a hidden folder called $Sherpa Software. And you're going to notice it's quite the tree here going down. And if you went to policies, there's going to be a folder called logs. And notice we have 4 logs here because we're processing 4 data targets. So there is a log generated for every data target that you're processing. So just keep that in mind. You can look at these. If you have access to the VM and you're that curious, you could open these things up and running. So I've been asked quite often, once again, how do I know it's still running? We don't give you percentage. All we're giving you, going back, in fact, I'm going to go back to the previous slide. All we're giving you here is how many have finished. It's not a percentage. It's just overall how many data targets have been finished processing. So what I'm showing you here is, in this case, all 4 are still running. As these finish, and as soon as, in fact, I'll be showing you the next slide, as soon as Discover knows that these logs, each log is done for a data target, it is going to then upload that to the Azure database so we can view it in the browser. So if you're that curious, you have access to the VM, you can come in here and look inside of here. As far as the service log in this structure, there is a peer of policies called logs, which does add some confusion, but that's where the service is the log is. It's a peer of policies, but to get to the data target logs, you need to go in policies and go to logs. So logs as a peer to policies is at the service level. Logs as a subordinate to policies is actually for the data targets. So these things will disappear as you go. But this, if you only have access to the UI, this is where you would see which ones have finished and which ones have not. If you're on the VM and you're wondering, hey, how do I know if this is progressing? Well, you could open it and look at the last date time, or what I tell people a lot is look at the last modified date time and or the size. If it's either one's changing, especially if this is incrementing, that means it's still running. Because what we're telling you is we're still processing that data target. Not how far done we are, but we're processing it. So if you go in here into the VM, then this is where it's going to show you. Once again, you don't all have access to that, but those you do, I wanted to make sure that you understood how to find that. So now we go in and here we have, hey, look, 3 or 4 are done. And lo and behold, there's only 1 log left being processed. So that's what's going to happen. Discover is constantly going through and bringing up the logs into Azure that have been finished and then updating the status here. And most likely, this update is going to occur once a minute. By default, it's refreshing on its own once a minute. If you're impatient like me, you can go to the common refresh grid and see if anything's changed in the past 30 seconds, or you can just wait for Discover to refresh it for you. So once that is finished, I'm going to go back a couple of slides. I didn't want to be too repetitive in here, but here we have this information. We have this information that we clicked on to get to this. Now, when these finish, I could actually go in and I could put a check mark next to it, go to action, download log. And that's what this is doing for us. So we're going to actually see the entries for every data target. I want to go get Chandler Bing's log because the whole thing finished. Notice the 3 completed. I want to go grab and look at that. This is especially useful when one fails, honestly, because that'll give you some insight. I was just working with a client an hour ago that were getting some errors and they're trying to figure out why. So we opened up the logs and there was the information. So you can download the log. There's no way to be able to view the log inside of Discover. You could download it and then you can open it up in Notepad++, which is my favorite one, to be able to review that log. If you select more than 1 log and download them, they will produce a zip file, and then you just have to unzip it to be able to see the individual logs. But let's pretend I downloaded the log and I opened it. So this is what we're going to see. This is the boilerplate that's going to be pretty much the same every time you open it up. It's going to give us a lot of information in here about different things and how Discover is working. And for instance, what version it's running, what Outlook version it's found. Is it running as 32-bit or 64-bit? A lot of these things can be very helpful when you're debugging, trying to understand why is this failing? Well, a lot of times we see, well, you're trying to run it as a 32-bit and you downloaded the 64-bit version of the agent, for instance. So that's probably not a good plan. It's also going to show you things like here's our number of threads that we specify within the connector settings. Here's that debug mode is on, it's true. So I can see all this stuff. So this is going to be pretty much the same. And then the next 2 screenshots here, this is just going in and we're starting the policy processing. And you're going to notice all the things it does is, hey, here's Chandler Bing's mailbox, and he has 77 folders. And one at a time, we're going to go through every folder and we're going to tell you, okay, we found 1 message in this folder and 12 in this one. So you're going to see the counts as we go through. Even the empty folders will have counts next to them, just so you see all the folders that we are processing, because this should equate to what you have in your workflow. If you're excluding folders in your workflow and you're seeing them in the log, you did not exclude them properly. So it's nice to be able to get that visualization and confirmation that how I configured the workflow is actually the folders that are being processed by Discover. And then at the end, you're going to see this policy processing finished for. This is what is the cue for Discover saying, hey, I know the log is done. It will then upload that upload it into Azure so that you can go and view it within a browser. So I hope that gives you some ideas of how the logs work, the 2 different types, both the service and the policy logs, as well as how you can view them, where to find them, and what have you. So I'm hoping this helps. If it doesn't, we're surely more than welcome to answer any questions you might have, either right now or anything you need, just email support, and we can certainly help you out that way as well. Marcia?
We do have a few right now, Jeff, so
Okay.
hold that thought. Yeah.
Yep.
And that was great. I mean, I'm not techie, as you know, and that information's a lot, but you explained it very well. Good job
Oh,
there.
thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so our first question that we have is, how often are the logs uploaded to the cloud?
Well, they're going to be about, I don't know the exact freeze. So I would say every 15 to 20 minutes, they're going to go up. Now you could get it happen more frequently, and it's all depending on your timing. So if Discover just uploaded the logs a minute ago, you might be waiting a little bit longer than the ones that you could have perfect timing that they just uploaded as you wanted them to. So it's all a matter of that frequency that it has of where you fall within that timing. But they're going to be uploaded pretty frequent. And I mean, as soon as that policy finishes for me, I go in and I'm able to download the logs. So it's happening pretty fast.
Okay, good. Second question we have is how long are the logs kept?
Well, that was the retention on one of the first slides. So remember,
Mm.
you have control over that. So if you want the logs to be retained longer than the default that we give you, which I'm not quite sure, I think it might be 15 or 30 days, then you could change that number. Once again, I wouldn't make it too small, just so if you don't notice that something failed, that we don't lose the log, because otherwise you're going to have to run the policy again to produce a new log.
Okay. Another one is what is the log name when you download it?
Oh, good question. In fact, let's go back and let's see if I have an example of that. There we go. So right here, so this is a GUID. So what that means is a global universal ID. So we assign a GUID to every log. So can you actually discern what mailbox this is for? No, but when you open the log, you're going to find that right about here where we see Chandler's name. So we can't use, we have to use the GUID to make sure that we're not overwriting one log with another. That's why we do it that way. I know it's not the most intuitive when you're looking at the logs, but once you open them, then you can certainly identify the data target that's being processed.
Yeah, that GUID thing I wouldn't have known, Jeff.
Yeah, it's
A
just a
lot of
hexadecimal
lot of
number.
characters for
Yes,
sure.
it is a lot of characters.
And we got one more question, unless anybody else posts to the Q&A. How many logs are created for a policy?
Well, there's always going to be one more than the number of data targets. So there's going to be a log, I think it's called the hub service, I believe is what the log name is. So you're always going to see that. So if you run a policy with 5 data targets and you go in and go through the UI as I showed you how to get to the individual listing, then you're going to have 6 logs in there. And it's very evident which ones are for data targets and which one is for the hub. In fact, the word hub is in the description. So that is going to be the place where if you want to see some overall information, that's not a whole lot of information in there. If you're trying to troubleshoot data targets, definitely open up the data target logs. But there's always going to be one more log than your number of data targets in the policy or search.
Okay, great. That is it for the question. So yeah, so if you could go to the next slide, Jeff, that would be great. Thank you. Great. So yeah, folks, that's it for today's session. We thank you for attending. We hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit about this subject. As mentioned earlier, the session is being recorded and we'll get that out to you in the coming days. You can always take a look at our Gimmal YouTube channel for any past sessions too that you might have missed. Here's a remaining session schedule for our series in Q1. We have one more for our Gimmal physical product on March 20th. The Q2 schedule will be coming out soon. We've just finalized that, so be on the lookout for that on your in your emails. If you have any suggestions for session topics that you would like us to cover, please feel free to email those to myself. We'll be sure to add them to the list. We're always looking for ideas to make sure that you all are getting what you need from these and for your product knowledge. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody.
day.